A brave nurse got mocked for her scars during daughter's graduation. But then 15 Marines stood up and silenced the entire room. It was on a calm Thursday morning when Nurse Angela arrived at her daughter's graduation. Little did she know what was waiting for her, an event that would alter her life completely. She pulled into the parking lot and stepped out of her car in a well-ironed navy blue camouflage uniform, the sun catching the careful creases she had pressed just hours before. The morning was cool, the sky soft with thin clouds, but her palms were already damp with nerves. She had rehearsed this moment in her head countless times, hoping it would go perfectly, willing the universe to grant her this one chance to be present. That was when she noticed the first stares. Eyes flicked to the scar that slashed diagonally across her face, a twisted line of puckered flesh that no amount of cream or surgery could erase. She ignored it at first. She had long grown used to strangers staring. But the murmurs began soon after, low, conspiratorial voices that rose in brief, cutting bursts. Is that a soldier? At a graduation? Look at her face. My God. She straightened her back and lifted her chin, refusing to let it touch her. She had survived worse than gossip. She had survived war zones and field hospitals, desperate parents weeping over bloodied stretchers. She reminded herself this was about her daughter, about making up for all those birthdays she had missed, the times she hadn't been there for homework help, the nights her daughter had cried herself to sleep because mom was deployed halfway across the world. She forced herself to smile as she moved toward the entrance of the school. Each step felt heavy. A young mother pulled her child closer, as if Angela's uniform were a threat. A man in a sharp suit nudged his friend and whispered something that made both men laugh, eyes trained shamelessly on her face. She heard the word disfigured somewhere in the exchange. Angela's heart clenched, but she kept walking. Inside, the corridor buzzed with parents and grandparents holding flower bouquets and balloons, teenagers in their gowns practicing how they'd walk across the stage. Angela felt out of place in her navy camouflage, even though it was pressed and formal. She'd chosen it intentionally. She was proud of her service. She was proud of what it said about her loyalty, her sacrifice, her ability to fight for people who couldn't fight for themselves. But that scar, it always spoke before she could. The scar told stories she wished no one had to know. She had earned it overseas while shielding a wounded Marine from a grenade blast. She had felt the heat and shrapnel tear into her skin, the smell of burned flesh mingling with the metallic tang of blood. She had blacked out from the pain but woke up in a field hospital and tried to sit up immediately because she knew other soldiers needed her. Even with her face freshly stitched, she had gone back to work. There was no choice. That day had defined her. But to these parents, it was just ugly. Angela finally reached the court where the graduation would take place. Rows of folding chairs fanned out in neat lines beneath the open sky. A stage draped in the school colors stood at the front, decorated with banners and balloons that swayed lightly in the morning breeze. She saw her daughter's class milling behind the stage, laughter and nervous chatter floating in the air. For the first time that morning, her heart lifted. She was here. She had made it. She checked the program in her hand, fingers trembling. Her daughter's name was printed in bold letters. Valedictorian. Her eyes misted. Even after all the years of missing birthdays and holidays, her daughter had done it. Angela felt pride, so huge it almost cracked her ribs. She found her seat in the front row, reserved for parents of honors students. She forced her shoulders back and settled in, refusing to let herself fidget. But that was when things got even more serious. More people noticed her. She heard the hush spread along the row as she sat. One woman shifted uncomfortably, turning her body to angle away. A man 2 seats down openly stared at her scar, his eyes hard and unblinking. Angela felt the heat in her face rise. "Mommy, what's wrong with her?" A little boy's voice rang out a few rows back. "Sure," his mother hissed, but not before the words sank in. Angela squeezed the program until it crumpled. She tried to focus on the stage, on the school crest, on anything other than the growing pit in her stomach. She couldn't let this get to her. Not now. Not after everything. She glanced around, catching scattered expressions of pity, confusion, even disgust. Some turned away, embarrassed by their own reactions. Others didn't bother to hide their curiosity. The world, she thought grimly, was unkind to anyone marked in a way it didn't understand. She thought of all the men and women she had patched up on operating tables, screaming in pain, begging to live. She had told them they would make it home. She had kept that promise, no matter what it cost her. Angela's eyes dropped to her uniform, the navy insignia catching a glint of light. It felt like armor. It had to be, because today wasn't about her. It was about her daughter. And no matter how many people whispered or stared, she wasn't going to run. She sat up straighter, the scar on her face shifting with emotion. She tilted her chin up and refused to look away from the stage. Even as the murmurs grew, even as the tension thickened like storm clouds, she reminded herself she had missed too much. She wouldn't miss this. Because despite everything, despite deployments, battlefields, scars and all, she was her daughter's mother. And that was worth more than anyone's opinion in this entire room. Angela let out a slow breath, willing her heart to steady. She was here. As the ceremony began, formal speeches and polite laughter floated through the hall like polite music at a dinner party, all practiced cheer and forced composure. Angela sat rigid in her front row seat, uniform collar snug against her neck, the program trembling slightly in her grip. She had willed herself to stay calm, to focus only on her daughter's big day. But behind her, she felt the weight of a gaze that burned hotter than stage lights. A man's voice sliced through the polite hush, sharp and dripping with disdain. You'd think she'd cover up that ugly scar. The words struck Angela like a slap, making her vision blur for a second. Before she could steady her breathing, his wife let out a high, brittle laugh. Honestly, who wears that uniform to graduation? Trying to prove something. They hadn't even tried to whisper. The words were meant for her to hear, and they landed with cruel precision. Angela felt heat crawl up her neck to her cheeks, her ears ringing with shame and anger. Around her, she sensed others noticing. Eyes flicked to her face and quickly darted away, pretending they hadn't heard anything at all, but their silence only confirmed it. Her fingers tightened on the program until it crumpled in her lap. Memories flooded back unbidden. Blood-soaked cots, sand whipping against medical tents, the choked sobs of young Marines clutching at her uniform as she pressed gauze against wounds that wouldn't stop bleeding. She heard their screams again, smelled the antiseptic, the blood, the fear. The scar on her face pulsed with remembered pain. That line of twisted flesh was the price of shielding a wounded man with her own body. It was the cost of not abandoning her post when it would have been safer to run. No makeup could cover it. No apology would ever erase it. She blinked hard, fighting the sting in her eyes. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her cry. She had cried enough on battlefields thousands of miles from home. She was here for one reason only, to see her daughter walk across that stage. Angela drew in a slow breath, straightened her back even more, and lifted her chin. Let them stare. Let them judge. She wasn't moving. She wouldn't let their cruelty steal this moment from her or her child. The snickers spread like a disease through the nearby rows, an infection of cruelty that thrived on shared malice. Angela felt it in her bones, the thick, suffocating silence between their bursts of laughter, the way people tried not to look but couldn't help themselves. The man's voice turned louder, meaner, emboldened by the attention. Scars don't make you a hero, you know. He said it like a punchline, expecting more laughter. His wife delivered it. It's pathetic. She's embarrassing, that poor girl. Angela's chest tightened so fiercely she struggled to draw breath. Her fingers clenched the crumpled program in her lap. Memories crashed over her like a dark tide. She remembered the weight of broken bodies, the sticky heat of blood on her gloves as she worked to keep hearts beating, the thunder of mortar shells rattling the ground. The faces of the young men and women she'd promised she wouldn't let die, even as she felt the sting of shrapnel tearing her own flesh. The scar was her reminder of sacrifice, of duty, of a moment when she chose someone else's life over her own safety. She had never felt the need to explain that to anyone. She'd thought she never would. But the words twisted something deep inside her. Old doubts flared. Was she truly a good mother? How many milestones had she missed while patching others back together? For one flickering second, she thought about standing up, about leaving before more could be said, before she heard one more insult that might shatter the fragile hope that this day could still be beautiful. Just as the laughter threatened to swell, sharp, brittle, ready to humiliate her even further, a sudden sound broke the moment like glass shattering on marble. Boots scraped the polished floor in a single, chilling chorus. The noise was so out of place, so precise, that it stopped every conversation mid-word. Heads turned. Parents and students fell silent, the echo of the movement hanging heavy in the air. Angela turned too, breath caught in her throat. Her eyes widened. 15 Marines in full dress blues had risen as one. Their movements were sharp, disciplined, perfectly in sync, as if they shared a single mind. Rows of medals gleamed on their chests under the overhead lights, their white gloves crisp and immaculate. They weren't simply standing, they were imposing. The room seemed to contract around them, the air growing denser, more charged. The couple behind Angela, who had been snickering just seconds ago, fell silent. The man's mouth twitched, the smirk dying on his lips as his face blanched. His wife turned stiffly, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. The laughter that had threatened to spread like wildfire choked off instantly, smothered beneath the weight of those 15 stares that landed on them like lead. Other parents shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some swallowed hard, looking at the Marines with newfound respect. A few turned red, suddenly ashamed they hadn't spoken up themselves. Children who'd been giggling into phones sat frozen, wide-eyed at the sight of so many solemn, uniformed warriors standing at attention in a school auditorium. Fear and chills rippled through the rows. Whispers died before they could be born. Even the teachers seated on the side of the stage stopped shuffling their papers. A hush fell over the entire hall, not the easy hush of polite applause or the gentle quiet before a name was read, but a heavy, suffocating, inescapable silence that demanded introspection. The Marines didn't shout. They didn't need to. Their silence was louder than any rebuke. Angela sat frozen, her heart pounding. She felt tears sting her eyes, but refused to let them fall just yet. She didn't dare blink. The sight before her was too much, too overwhelming. These weren't strangers to her. She recognized some of them instantly, their faces more lined than when she had first seen them on operating tables or bloody desert roads. A young man she'd pulled through emergency surgery, even as her own arm was in a sling. A woman she'd comforted through the morphine fog while tending to a shredded leg. A Marine whose chest she'd compressed for endless minutes, refusing to let his heart stop, screaming at the corpsman to get more blood. Angela remembered their screams, their tears, their whispered prayers. She remembered how she had refused to rest until they were stable, how she had barked orders and taken risks no one asked her to take because leaving them to die simply wasn't an option. She had given every ounce of strength she had in those tents, with the dust and blood and the cries of the dying pressing in from all sides. And they remembered too. One Marine stepped forward. He moved with the slow, deliberate confidence of someone who understood the weight of every eye on him. He was tall, square-jawed, older than the last time she had seen him. His uniform was immaculate, but his eyes held something raw, something human. He looked straight at Angela, his expression solemn but warm. He raised his right hand in a crisp salute. The room seemed to hold its breath. Angela felt her lungs seize up. She had seen salutes countless times. She had returned them, sometimes while bleeding, sometimes with gloved hands sticky with someone else's blood. But no salute had ever felt like this. He didn't speak yet. He didn't have to. His salute was a tribute and a shield all at once. It was an unspoken vow to stand with her now, to stand against the cruel laughter, the thoughtless insults, the shame they had tried to pin on her. Behind him, the other 14 Marines didn't waver. Their eyes scanned the room slowly, methodically, pinning the mocking parents in place. There was no rage on their faces, just absolute, unyielding disappointment, the kind that cut deeper than any shouted curse. Angela's gaze flicked back to the couple behind her. The man swallowed hard, unable to hold the Marine's gaze. His wife's face had lost all color. They sat pressed back in their chairs as if trying to melt into them, their smugness stripped away. The silence in the room wasn't empty. It was judgment. It was memory. It was honor. Angela's fingers loosened their grip on the crumpled program in her lap. She drew in a shaky breath. She felt small in that moment, not because of their insults, but because of the enormity of what was happening. These Marines were hers, in a way no one else in that auditorium could understand. She had stitched them back together when their bodies were broken. She had kept death at bay with her bare hands. She had whispered promises she refused to break. And now they were here. For her. The Marine who had saluted lowered his hand only after the last echo of his movement died in the hush. His eyes held hers. Angela didn't know what to say. She didn't think she could speak even if she wanted to. Her throat was too tight. But she didn't need to, because their silence had said everything, and she understood every word of it. The room felt suspended in time, as though even the air itself had frozen to listen. No one shuffled, no one coughed. Every parent, student, and teacher seemed to hold the same breath, waiting for what would come next. The Marine at the front of the formation kept his eyes locked on Angela. His voice, when it came, was quiet but carried through the hush with perfect clarity. "Ma'am, with respect for every life you saved." The words sliced through the heavy silence, clean and undeniable. There was no ceremony in them, no theatrics, just truth. Simple, raw, irrefutable. Angela felt the words strike her chest like a physical blow. Her throat closed tight. She couldn't breathe for a second. The memory of heat and screams and chaos swarmed her senses. The blinding glare of field lights over wounded bodies, the blood that soaked her gloves, the sharp, molten agony of shrapnel tearing her cheek open while she covered a Marine with her own body. She remembered that moment most clearly. The hot metallic scent of blood, the grit in her teeth, the split second of terror that she wouldn't survive to save the man beneath her. But she had. She'd kept going even as blood poured down her face, even as pain blurred her vision. She had finished the job because that was what was asked of her. That was the duty she had sworn to uphold. Now this Marine, one of many she had fought for, stood before her in dress blues, medals glinting, shoulders squared in perfect posture, and offered her respect she hadn't even known she deserved. Angela's eyes stung fiercely. She blinked quickly, but one tear slipped free and trailed down the scar on her face, glistening like a river of memory. She didn't wipe it away. She let it fall, honoring everything that had brought her here, everything that had carved that mark into her flesh. The mocking parents sat stiff as statues behind her. The man's face had lost all color, and the woman's lips were pressed into a thin line of shame. Neither dared speak now. They didn't dare move. The power of that single sentence, delivered without anger or threat, was enough to pin them to their seats. Their cruelty had been laid bare for all to see, stripped and shamed by the quiet force of honor. Around the room, eyes glistened. A teacher pressed a hand to her chest. A student whispered something too soft to hear. But no one clapped yet. No one spoke. The moment was too big for that. Angela lowered her eyes briefly, overwhelmed by the weight of gratitude and sorrow pressing down on her. She had spent so long feeling like she had failed her daughter, missed too many moments she could never get back. She had accepted the insults as something she had earned, some punishment for being absent. But here, now, these Marines stood for her. They remembered what she had done when no one else would. She lifted her gaze again and met the Marines' eyes. They didn't smile. They didn't need to. The respect there was pure, unmarred by pity or apology. The other 14 Marines remained at rigid attention, their heads held high, their eyes scanning the room. They didn't waver. Their collective silence was louder than any applause could have been. It spoke of shared sacrifice, of lives intertwined by the brutal necessity of survival. Angela's heart thundered in her chest. She wanted to say something, to thank them, but no words would come. She felt them press against her throat, thick and hot and impossible to speak. So she simply sat there, back straight, uniform immaculate, scar uncovered, tears trailing freely. In that moment, she wasn't ashamed of her scar. She wasn't the object of cruel jokes or pitying stares. She was what she had always been, a nurse, a soldier, a protector, and they had seen it. They had honored it. That was enough. As the silence shattered, the applause didn't begin hesitantly or politely. It erupted like a storm breaking over dry land. It was not the careful, restrained clapping of polite society, but something raw, something grateful, something that caught in throats and burned in eyes. Rows of parents leapt to their feet. Teachers dropped their programs and pressed palms together so hard their hands shook. Even the students waiting in line to walk the stage forgot their nervous rehearsal of steps and handshakes and cheered with abandon. The sound rolled through the hall in powerful, rolling waves, crashing against the stage, echoing off the high ceiling. Angela sat frozen for a heartbeat. She felt the applause hit her like wind in a storm. She blinked through tears that had finally refused all control. It wasn't for the Marines. It wasn't even for her scar. It was for her. For what she had given up. For what she had given them. In the far corner of the stage, her daughter had been waiting, diploma not yet in hand, half hidden behind classmates. But now she was out in the open, eyes wide and shining, lips trembling. She saw everything. The Marines at attention, their silent vow of respect. The rows of strangers clapping as though to wash away every cruel word. Her mother in that navy camouflage uniform, back straight, scar shining wet with tears. And it hit her all at once. All those lonely nights with the empty chair at dinner. All the birthdays where it was just her and a cake with too many candles. All the phone calls where the line was crackly and the words were rushed, and she tried not to cry so her mother wouldn't hear. All the half-truths she'd told friends about why her mom couldn't come to parents' night, or the recital, or the science fair. For years, she'd felt that empty space in her life like a wound she was supposed to ignore. She had learned to be independent, to say she didn't need help, to smile through disappointment. But here was her mother, in front of everyone. Her mother who had saved lives at the cost of her own face. Who wore the uniform that others mocked but she had earned 100 times over. Who sat there, shaking, crying, refusing to run even when they insulted her. Angela didn't even see her daughter move at first. She only felt it when the applause swelled even louder, a roar of approval that turned into a single, collective gasp. Because her daughter broke formation. She ran. Her graduation gown flew behind her like wings. The cap wobbled dangerously on her head. A teacher reached out to stop her and then thought better of it. She didn't walk with ceremony. She didn't slow for dignity. She ran as if the world had narrowed to the front row, to the seat where her mother sat trembling with emotion. Angela saw her coming at last. She pushed herself up from the chair with effort, her knees weak, her breathing ragged. She held out her arms as if she were trying to catch a star falling from the sky. And then her daughter crashed into her. They nearly fell back into the chair, but Angela held fast. She dropped the program, didn't care where it fell, wrapped her arms around her daughter and pulled her so close that neither could breathe. Her uniform crinkled against the smooth graduation gown. Her tears with the tassel on her daughter's cap. She buried her face in her daughter's hair and let the sob break loose. For years she had promised herself she wouldn't cry in uniform. But the promise meant nothing now. "I'm sorry," she whispered against the crown of her daughter's head. The words trembled with years of guilt and longing. "I'm so sorry." But her daughter only shook her head wildly, arms locking around Angela's back. "No," she gasped, voice cracking. "Don't say sorry. Don't you dare." Angela tried again, choking on the words. "I missed everything. I missed so much." Her daughter pulled back just far enough to meet her eyes. Tears streaked the girl's cheeks, but her gaze was fierce. "You were there," she said. "You were always there. Even when you weren't. You never left me. You're here now." Angela swallowed. She tried to speak, but no words would come. So she held her tighter. The applause had softened but hadn't stopped. It changed from raucous to respectful, a rhythmic testament to forgiveness and understanding. Around them, people wiped tears. Some parents reached for their children's hands. Teachers nodded slowly, as if realizing something they'd forgotten long ago. And the Marines? They hadn't moved an inch. They remained at attention, eyes straight ahead, faces unreadable but hearts unmistakably in the moment. Guardians not just of Angela, but of this fragile, beautiful embrace that rewrote everything. The man and woman who had mocked her shrank in their chairs. They couldn't look away, forced to watch what real love and sacrifice looked like. Their shame was complete. Angela finally eased her hold enough to see her daughter properly. She brushed hair from the girl's face with shaking fingers. "You're so beautiful," she said, voice breaking. Her daughter smiled through tears. "You're my hero." Angela lost it then. She laughed, a broken, gasping sound, and the tears fell unchecked. They clung to each other, scar and gown, uniform and cap, mother and daughter, finally whole. And in that moment, there was no war, no distance, no regret, only love. As the thunder of applause finally subsided into an odd hush, the weight of the moment seemed to settle gently over the entire hall. Rows of folding chairs creaked as people leaned forward, eager but quiet, their faces washed in the late morning light that streamed through high windows. The air was warm with the buzz of emotion. A collective understanding that they had all witnessed something that would linger in memory far longer than the day itself. Angela sat trembling, still clutching her daughter's hand. Their embrace had broken only moments earlier, but neither had let go entirely, fingers laced tight, refusing any more distance between them. Tears still glistened on Angela's scarred cheek, but she no longer tried to wipe them away. For once she felt no need to hide any part of herself. The Marines who had stood in unbreakable formation finally eased back into their seats. Even as they sat, their spines remained straight, their eyes bright with a quiet satisfaction. They had delivered their message, honor given, honor accepted. Now they simply watched, witnesses to the next moment that would define this day. At the front of the hall, the principal tapped the microphone twice, clearing his throat. The static crackled softly, drawing every gaze back to the stage. He adjusted his glasses, his expression solemn, but his voice rang out warm and sure. "Thank you, everyone, for your patience," he said, nodding once toward Angela and her daughter, as though silently acknowledging everything that had just unfolded. "We have one more very special honor to announce." The hall held its breath. Angela's heart thudded. This year's valedictorian and recipient of the Best Graduating Student Award, he paused, smiling, goes to someone who has shown not only academic excellence but resilience, leadership, and grace under pressure. Angela felt her daughter's hand tighten in hers. She turned and saw those big, tear-filled eyes widen with wonder. The principal read her name, clear and strong. The cheers erupted once more. But this time, the sound was different. Brighter. Warmer. There was no awkwardness, no polite obligation. It was free of cruelty or pity. It was a roar of genuine pride that spilled from the audience in wave after wave. Parents who had once whispered behind Angela's back now clapped so hard their palms turned red. Teachers stood and whistled. Students who had been lost in their phones now called her name and chanted it in giddy, joyous unison. Angela felt the vibration of it in her bones. Her daughter jerked once, as though to run into her arms again, but Angela squeezed her hand gently, nodding toward the stage. "Go," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Go get what you earned." The girl blinked at her, tears streaking her makeup, her cap slightly askew. Then she drew a shaky breath, squared her shoulders the way Angela had taught her without ever saying a word, and let go. She walked, but not like before. No hesitation, no fear, no doubt. Her back was straight, her chin lifted. Every step was measured, deliberate, regal. She wore her graduation gown like a queen's robe, her tassel dancing proudly as she moved. The crowd didn't quiet for her to pass. If anything, they grew louder. And Angela watched her go, every step a balm on years of guilt. She saw the child she used to rock to sleep, forehead pressed to soft hair. She saw the girl she had to leave behind too many times, pressed against an airport gate window. She saw the stubborn teen who had refused to write back for months because the hurt was too deep. She saw the woman she was becoming, right there in front of everyone. And she realized that even if she hadn't been there for every moment, she had been there in all the ones that counted most. Her daughter mounted the steps to the stage, accepting the principal's offered hand. He gave her the medal, draped it around her neck. The certificate followed. The clapping wouldn't stop. The principal gestured for quiet once more, and with effort, the hall obliged. He leaned toward the microphone. "Would our valedictorian like to say a few words?" Angela's heart nearly stopped. Her daughter looked out at the sea of faces, saw the Marines watching solemnly, the parents in rapt attention, the teachers nodding encouragement. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and leaned into the mic. Her voice shook but didn't break. "I just want to say, thank you." She paused, breath catching. "Thank you, this school. To my teachers. To my friends. And—" She turned, searching until her eyes found Angela's. "Thank you to my mom. For everything she's done for me. For this country. For people she didn't even know. I know she thinks she missed out on my life. But she didn't. Because she taught me how to fight for what matters. How to stand up when it's hard. How to be brave, even when you're scared." Angela's tears flowed freely now. Her daughter touched the medal at her chest. "This is for you, Mom." The hall went silent again. And then the cheers returned, bigger than ever. Angela pressed her hand to her heart. The scar on her face burned warmly in the heat of her tears, but she no longer felt the shame of it. It wasn't something to hide. It was a badge, a testament, proof she had fought, proof she had loved, proof she had given everything she had. As her daughter walked back down the steps, medal glinting, certificate held tight, she locked eyes with Angela. Angela smiled. A real, unguarded, blindingly proud smile. In that moment, everything fell away, the battles, the absences, the harsh words, the cruel laughter. There was only love. There was only pride. Mother and daughter, finally whole. Bound forever by sacrifice, respect, and a promise that the past would never steal another day between them. If you enjoyed Angela and her daughter's powerful story, please like, share, and subscribe. Let us know your thoughts about how it all ended. How would you rate this story on a scale of 10? Drop your rating and tell us where you're watching from. We'd love to hear your reflections on Angela's sacrifice and her daughter's ultimate pride.